Seriously, if you have to construct hideous new buildings, at least don't use them to rape the old ones.
Did you just saw my tweet?
The winner of a design competition for a new Senate building in the Philippines looks like 4 trash cans having sex.
Oops! Yes, he did. Doesn't it feel so good to have the man, the myth, and the legend of both YouTube and Twitter to have your tweet get noticed and use my own words with this iconic voice?
Who cares, Francis? Everybody gets noticed by people on the social media every day.
Nothing to see here! Please disperse!
Speaking of getting noticed, I guess it's now an achievement for me to add him in my famous people who notice me list. But seriously, I know most of you people don't know who Paul Joseph Watson is, but here's my answer for now. If it wasn't for this guy, I wouldn't have opened my own YouTube channel. Without him in the first place, you wouldn't be watching this video and all my other videos in my channel at all. That's right, he's a true inspiration. The internet is so magically interesting nowadays that even small things can create huge consequences. Architecture. I made a video about architecture last time after making a controversial tweet. I don't have to explain it anymore here, go watch it yourself. Now I'm not saying I'm 100% agreeing with this guy, he just has a point. Go watch his videos linked in the description. Modern architecture has changed the world until it reached its global peak since the forefathers were looking for designs that eventually became an establishment since the late 19th century.
A point of clarification. In this video, I'm referring to modern architecture with a big M, a formal architectural design movement that was most prominent during the early to mid 20th century. The word modern with a small m, which describes things that happened recently, makes this kind of confusing. As in, a neoclassical style building that was completed in the last few years is technically modern, but it's not modern.
I'm looking at you, Louis Sullivan. Thanks for your contribution to creating skyscrapers, but the established phrase that form follows function, even when mentioned a million times by architects, sadly they start to forget that it has its own cons.
The thing is, modern architecture is not just about how it looks. A truly modernist design adheres to a strict set of formal rules that upholds modernism's fundamental principle: form follows function.
Now we're increasingly surrounded by atrocities like this. Why is modernist and postmodernist architecture so grotesque? Because after World War II, radical architects launched a revolution against earlier traditionalist styles, believing they represented colonialism, racism, slavery, and exploitation. It was the revenge of mediocrity upon talent and taste.
American architect Louis Sullivan expressed the credo of the modernists when he said that form follows function. In other words, stop thinking about the way a building looks and think instead about what it does.
Look, this has been a long-time principle that stabilized the foundation of skyscrapers. Without it, there won't be the recent Freedom Tower, the Petronas Towers, the Burj Khalifa, and so on. They were already iconic as they represent their own nation, and I cannot argue with that.
However, it's clear that many people, as demonstrated in the comments, have a strong rejection towards modernism, seeing it as monotonous, ugly, and even dehumanizing.
That is the ugliest building.
Yeah, it is.
Certainly in London. It looks like just a bunch of chicken cages. Yeah. Not free range, isn't it? You know, it's like a nightmare. Orwellian, bruv. Yeah. Brave new Matrix, you know.
It's called St. George's Wharf and it's so ugly.
This building is boarded up because nobody has a use for it. Nobody has a use for it because nobody wants to be in it. Nobody wants to be in it because the thing is so damned ugly.
Again, I'm not saying that I hate modern architecture. Their functionality is still important to us, especially skyscrapers. Because functionality is more important than form, right?
Sullivan's doctrine has been used to justify the greatest crime against beauty that the world has yet seen. And that is the crime of modern architecture.
I'm talking about how the current architectural establishment is trying to eradicate the old ones. That's what I'm not happy about. It has always been about the battle of modernism versus traditionalism, but sadly, traditionalism is on the losing side.
Many were followers of theorists associated with the international style, such as Walter Gropius, Mies van der Rohe, and Le Corbusier. They argued that architectural design should be disassociated from historic reference, be free of unnecessary ornamentation, and be simplified to the essentials of function.
Oh, but there's no good or bad architecture, just like there's no good or bad art. It's all subjective bullshit. We were spoilt by thousands of years of brilliant architecture, all of it different in style, but impeccable in taste. Not only is modernist architecture manifestly horrid, it's inherently totalitarian. Modernist guru Le Corbusier deliberately lobbied for the construction of giant brutalist residential tower blocks on the fringes of cities to atomize and segregate the workers and the lower classes from the technocratic elite. We must create a mass production state of mind, he raved, demanding every city in the world adopt the same uniform style of bleak, concrete totalitarianism.
Remember this controversial construction of a skyscraper that's literally photobombing the Rizal Monument, a famous national heritage of the Philippines. It was constructed since 2011 and an organization called the Order of Knights of Rizal wanted it demolished. Yet all of the justice in the Supreme Court agreed to instead have it finished because the damage has already been done.
Look at this grim intruder onto the otherwise majestic skyline of Paris, Tour Montparnasse. Authorities must have realised their hideous mistake when they banned buildings over 7 stories tall just 2 years after its completion. But the damage was already done.
So now we all know about the Notre Dame fire and later on in the aftermath. But Paul left us a warning.
Surely you don't want to replace the sacred majesty of a 200-year-old Gothic spire which perfectly complemented an 850-year-old cathedral with some vulgar glassy steel monstrosity. Surely you wouldn't even think of— oh shit! New spire made from crystal, glass and stainless steel, just like the dome on the Reichstag, which looks fucking hideous. President Macron says the new look should be consistent with our modern, diverse nation. Well, given that your modern, diverse nation manifested nearly 900 attacks on Christian churches in 2018 alone, maybe best to leave the diversity out of it.
So after all of the billionaires, including Disney, who donated, well, billions of dollars, all together with the people's donations while we were distracting ourselves playing Assassin's Creed Unity to explore Notre Dame for free, only to come up with the so-called design of a renovation. We might as well have donated those billions to the millions of starving children all over the world. Listen, modernists, keep your fucking hands away from the centuries-old aesthetic relic that is Notre Dame, please. Well, I'd rather appreciate the architectural treasures in pop culture like Star Wars. Take a look at the Theed Royal Palace in Planet Naboo, for example. Well, if you're familiar with the more brutal and gritty space opera universe that is Warhammer 40k, then you have a good taste. All hail the God Emperor of Man! Because good for this guy, the so-called Imperial architecture is implemented in dedication to him in the Warhammer 40k universe actually looks badass. And hey, they even put Gothic designs on spaceships of the Imperial Navy. More badass! Well, I guess there's a reason why they called it Battlefleet Gothic in the first place. I mean, take a look at the Milan Cathedral. An absolute glory.
Just thank God Notre Dame's stained glass window survived. Or they could have ended up with this. Cologne Cathedral's south window. An abstract artist used a computer to randomly arrange 11,000 coloured squares into a 100 square metre collage. I would insult it by comparing it to Minecraft, but the Minecraft version actually looks better.
Why are we replacing the old aesthetic treasures with modern day monstrosities?
And given how modernist architects desecrated St. Michael's Parish in Scotland, turning this into this.
So this is where all of our money is going. Not only modernist architecture has defiled the relics of our past aesthetics, but it's also becoming a scam.
Lest they repeat what happened in Liverpool, where their Catholic cathedral was supposed to look like this, but ended up looking like this, when you order something online versus when it arrives. Federal Coffee Palace, an ornate wonder. Demolished and replaced with a bland office tower.
Apparently, I'm starting to think that the Notre Dame fire wasn't an accident anymore. It's now turning into an arson metaphorically created by aesthetic vandals. Meanwhile, here in the Philippines, obviously we are included in the globalist, modernist, international architectural establishment. It's inevitable. Going back to the functionality over form principle in my last video, I'm not saying that functionality has to be discarded over form, nor I am saying that form is more important than function. And I'm not saying that I disagreed with the fact that functionality is more important than form either. For example, the Yolanda housing project since 2014, right after Philippines was hit by the world's strongest typhoon on record. Until now, the houses are either incomplete, substandard, or there is now the lack of funding to complete the projects. Remember that this was during Aquino's administration. Philippines might be developing now in the recent years, but in reality, it has always been suffering by corruption from the core. Numerous accounts of ghost projects are reportedly to have scattered across the nation throughout the decades. Oh yeah, even if we have the cash, we'd rather spend it on building monstrous designs like this. And ironically, it's a winner of a design competition. 8.9 billion pesos and expected to be finished by July 2021. There are also other 4 entries of the Global Conceptual Design Competition for the new Senate building of the Philippines. Well, take your pick.
I like this one.
What are your criteria for such an architectural standard anyway? Enlighten me, please. Why not build something decent and classical like the National Museum of Fine Arts Manila, which basically represents something more? Because museums nowadays with modernist designs are literally raping decent looking old buildings. Like seriously, what the fuck have you done? Honestly, instead of getting angry, I actually laughed at it. I'd rather watch Disney's castle than that building with penis form in the heart of London.
But what's worse, being eaten to death or being fucked to death by a giant glass dildo?
Yes, this.
That's That's right, it's the Tulip, a 1,000-foot vibrator dominating the skyline of a major city. Its designer, Norman Foster, says it's, quote, inevitably controversial. I mean, God only knows why. Yeah, and that penis-ribbed condom building I mentioned before, guess who designed that? Norman Foster. What's next? Are you going to install vast containers at the top full of jizz so that everyone in the vicinity is soaked with skyscraper spunk?
Why are present-day architects so afraid to go back to traditionalist, neoclassical, and decent-looking designs that always gave life to buildings? Now, I'm not saying that you should make designs by putting gargoyles or nude statues on the facade. It's not a requirement. Neoclassicism and traditionalist designs are a genre and not a standard to be replaced throughout the years. That's because ugliness as a standard in the modern age is the new cool. Ugliness now is the new beauty.
Just like the art world, this rejection of the establishment has become the establishment. Prince Charles was right.
What I do not think is sensible in the long run and right is when the avant-garde becomes the establishment. And that is what has happened, I believe.
We're witnessing the uglification of the world. But in an age of ugliness, a work of beauty is an act of defiance.
And whoever rejects the mainstream is either hated upon or discarded out of society. Or worse, makes you a hipster or an outcast. Like that's a bad thing.
Oh, but don't dare criticize it, because that's hateful! Yes, they're now claiming that insulting concrete piles of elephant droppings like this deformity is hate speech. Having a basic grasp of aesthetic beauty makes you alt-right. It makes you a Nazi. Because in 2019, everything makes you a Nazi. Now,
in the Philippines, our cultural historical treasures are disappearing throughout the years. And no, I don't blame natural disasters like earthquakes destroying our churches built since the Spanish colonial era 300 years ago. There's already a law that protects our old churches as heritage sites and to be funded by the government for restoration and preservation. Come on guys, if Trump makes America great again, make Philippines again. From my perspective, it has always been my dream seeing old Spanish designed houses again around my neighborhood. Look at Vegan City, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, iconic for its centuries-old Spanish architecture preserved throughout the centuries. Look, no one is stopping you and neither it is wrong to go back to traditionalist designs. And speaking of making Philippines again, you don't have to ask permission from this guy. We're a democracy. You have the power to embrace our culture again by designing old buildings the way it was before. I know everyone was mad before since I posted that video and keep telling me on Twitter to become an architect instead. And what's with all these fucking ad hominems telling us to become architects just because we criticize modern architecture? Paul, you should have become an architect. You should have been hired as an architect. But let me tell you, I've been keeping this picture in my phone for 2 weeks now, just months before the start of our next school year in college this coming June. So I guess you know what that means. Look, this has nothing to do with my standpoint on modern architecture. No. I'm 20 now, and I know I needed a decent, stable job, okay? The future awaits. Meanwhile, as an artist also, it's time to apply my skills for the society. But if our future of our society is the complete eradication of our traditional objective beauty standards, then only God knows that our way of life and the human spirit are beyond redemption.
So why do people hate modern architecture? Because it erases historic traditions that are meaningful and symbolic to us. Its purist approach is in conflict with the complexities of contemporary life. Its utopian models fail to address the real needs of everyday people. And its strict formal principles cannot adapt to the shifting needs of a changing society.
The 2009 poll showed that the public preferred traditional architecture to modernist architecture. And thankfully, there are still small pockets of resistance. Advocates of neo-traditional architecture survive, and they're still erecting buildings like the Schermerhorn Symphony Centre in Nashville and the entire town of Poundbury in England. Look, this isn't a rant against modernity. I'm not saying that every building should be a pastiche or a facsimile. It's a rant against the hostility to the past that dominates postmodernist architecture. Just as hatred of and guilt about the past dominates virtually every aspect of postmodernism. It's a rant against the contrived exaltation of vulgarity, which is being used as an insidious form of social engineering. Just like in art, entertainment, and music, we need to rail against the relativist, collectivist, postmodernist lie that objective standards of beauty don't exist. They do. They always will. And while taste will always be subjective, we must never accept ugliness as a form of beauty.
Paul Joseph Watson has recently been banned by Facebook and Instagram earlier this week. I'm telling you this right now because the freedom of this world is constantly being abused. These are just people who value the truth and are being abused by those who have the power enough to silence them. If the establishment couldn't swallow reality, then reality will fail on them. Let us support these people and let not just their voices but all of our voices always be heard. Please smash that subscribe button, it really helps to support my channel.